Welcome to SportsBeat KC, the sports podcast of the Kansas City Star and KCUR. It's Tuesday, July 14th, and I'm Blair Kerkhoff. The FIFA World Cup has concluded in Kansas City. The games, fan fest, the watch parties, the visitors from across the globe, gone. I saw the cranes helping deconstruct Fan Fest and saw where there are hundreds of workers looking to return Arrowhead to its football form. Two of the teams that called Kansas City home as base camps, England and Argentina, where they were the last ones out, leaving for their semifinal match in Atlanta on Wednesday. The winner goes to the title game in New Jersey on Sunday. The loser goes to Miami for the third place game. But the party's over. I'm here to talk about what it all meant and what it could mean for Kansas City are Star columnists Sam McDowell and Vahe Gregorian. They were part of the Star's coverage of the world's biggest sporting event and will share their thoughts on what they experienced over the past few weeks and where Kansas City goes from here. And then I'll share what's on my radar in Kansas City sports this week. So the World Cup has come and gone and it has played to rave reviews nationally. Have you guys seen any of the stories written nationally, New York Times?
I started to look at the New York Times one by Joe Drape, our longtime friend and colleague roundabout.
Rockhurst High grad.
Yeah. And it's certainly seen sort of the broader ripples. Not that many specific things that I've seen in the last few days. You probably have.
Fortune magazine had a really nice story about Kansas City as a host city this week. And one of the things you brought up, Joe Drape's name, the number of national media folks who have weighed in on Kansas City as as a host. I've enjoyed reading all of them, of course, but the ones written by Kansas Cityans have been fun.
Yeah.
Mitchell Smith, who writes for the New York Times as well, he's correspondent based in Chicago, also penned a glowing article on Kansas City. And Becky Sullivan, the NPR national correspondent, covered the game on Saturday. So I'll be curious to see what she puts together from that experience. But it's hard to pick nits really when it comes to this.
It sure has felt like that. And look, this was on my mind this morning as I drove on Main Street on our way here and just sort of saw the dismantling beginning already, and it felt abrupt. But tell me if I'm missing something. But as Pam Kramer, the CEO, KC 2026 said before, when the terrible glitch with getting into the stadium at the first match happened, her deep concern was that would be the thing. And as it happened, the nimble recovery from that made that a blip. I think, we can certainly talk about the business aspects as its own thing, but as far as how it was run, how it worked, how it, I think, filled hearts, it seems to me it was just nothing but great.
I thought safety and security and transportation may have been the two biggest question marks, and they became the two biggest investments, right? So far, not so far. I mean, it's the door's closed, and I think Kansas City scored victories in those departments.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it's tough to make a blanket statement without knowing what every single person experienced on stuff like that. But I can say that our transportation experience was much different the first game compared to the ensuing five. And, I do think it speaks to the KC 2026 group's ability to not only plan for this thing for the 4 years since they were awarded a host city, but also, to plan to be flexible, to be able to plan for the unexpected. And I think a lot of that was out of their control, some of it within their control, but a lot of it within FIFA's control. And like Vahe said, they adapted.
So, Vahe, what did Kansas City do especially well here? What were some of the big victories for Kansas City?
Well, I think a few things, right? The organization was set up well, and I think we saw the model of the transportation set up ahead of time. It looked like a sophisticated model, but all that was going to matter was the execution. Apparently, again, with our whatever asterisk we put by the first match, which was multi-layered issues, I've heard nothing but good stuff about that. There might have been some things here and there, but they ran on time. They ran where they're supposed to. They adjusted. But the game within the game there is how welcoming Kansas City was, right? And it didn't really matter with whom you spoke or where you spoke to them or where they were from. That came up time and again. And I get that it's probably human nature to be complimentary to your hosts, but the distinctions being made, I think, were notable. And I don't even know where to begin, right, when you tell the Algeria Lawrence tale. But I'll tell you this, one of my specific conversations with an Algerian who had just come back from the Bay Area with Algeria and said that Kansas City was, by far his favorite aspect of this because of the way he was made to feel here. You certainly spoke with people too, Blair and Sam. I know you had a couple epic experiences with people with fascinating backstories about how they came here and what this looked like. So maybe you guys disagree, but it's hard not to think just the nature of Kansas City itself was what was most notable.
Yeah, I mean, I think, from the outside, a lot of people might be surprised. I mean, Blair, you mentioned just all the national coverage of this there's been. I don't think this World Cup changed Kansas City's feel. It's more just that the world got to experience the feel that Kansas City has. And it is those examples that Vahe mentioned. And, it's stuff that I don't know what the overall impact of this tournament's going to be to Kansas City. And I think the frustration for some people is it's going to be immeasurable, but it's clear that there's going to be an impact from this because of those. I mean, the amount of people that we all talked to that had first time in Kansas City, and the only negative impression I have was at that first match whenever somebody said, you got to figure out the traffic situation here. And it's like, well, you think it's bad here, go to the other World Cup sites, because we had heard that there were transportation issues getting to the matches at all the World Cup sites because FIFA had taken over outside the stadiums at a lot of them. But the actual experience here, I mean, it was the second to last day, which was the day before the match against Argentina, where I went back out to the Country Club Plaza. We were all there at the Plaza House, which was a cool exhibit, but Argentina was again having a party that they'd had before the match, their opening match, the World Cup, 25 days earlier. And, somebody said to me that they were pumped to see that the route took them back because they couldn't wait to get back to Kansas.
Yeah.
But I feel like, people from Kansas City will take both ways, pissed off that somebody said Kansas, but also it's exactly, I think, what just hits the heartstrings of people from Kansas City is when outsiders get to experience what they feel like they've experienced their whole life here.
It's funny, early on we were going to be confronted with the whole, is it Kansas, is it Missouri, are people arriving in the city of Kansas? And I think we all understood, and maybe the broader community, I'd say, did too, that this is not the time to be tisk-tisking and giving corrective measures. They mean this area. And, that's that. And this happened, Kansas City itself happens to be the hub, but they mean the area. And that's been great. One quick last thing, Blair, on it sort of maybe seemed very symbolic to me. I still don't know whether to say Orange or Oran fan walk. Sam was up at in Power and Light basically when it started. I was along the way, Mexico Cafe, Mexico Coffee, looking down on it. You were here looking out at its end. So we got through the three of us experience the whole thing. But one of my favorite parts of it was seeing how the thousands of people kind of evaporated as the parade went by, because a lot of them were just joining in. And also seeing Sam McDowell running with his twin brother, Evan, through the crowd when I was up there, because he was trying to get to the front to, just more nitty gritty hustle reporting. But all that, to me, it was how it all folded in, right? It felt like one living, breathing thing. And that I think was the collective experience for me.
Star columnists Vahe Gregorian and Sam McDowell are here, and we're talking about the World Cup as the games and the fan fests and the watch parties are behind us. Before I forget about it, there must not be a place in South America that is something city. because obviously they're not used to calling something. We had Kansas City, Oklahoma City. We had all kinds of cities titles in this country, in North America, but it must not exist.
It must be considered redundant.
Yes.
Right? This is Kansas. I don't need to say city.
We know it's a city. We're in the city.
That's an interesting point, though.
The mistake.
Belize City. I mean, but that's about it I can think of.
The mistake was made, 150 or whatever years ago when they didn't call this Missouri City.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
So, you guys are, I think you're on point with the sense of the whole thing. We all have lived in Kansas City for different amounts of times. Well, Sam, you're from here. Vahe, you've been here for a dozen years or more, and I've been here for several decades. We all have experienced and understand the welcoming nature of Kansas City and the Midwest, this part of the country. To me, one of the big contributions here was Kansas City and this part of the country got to deliver that to the largest amount of guests that it's ever had, the hundreds of thousands of people, whatever the final number will end up being, not just from not just international fans, but I think we spoke on this in an earlier podcast, the number of people that I ran into from the U.S. who had never been to Kansas City, who wanted to come here and experience this, whether it was the Orange Walk, a fan walk, or just a game. I told you I ran into a couple from New Jersey on the elevator at one of the earlier games, had never been to KC, but this was the easiest way for them to see a game. It wasn't at MetLife Stadium, it was coming to Kansas City and doing it. And I thought about that there were people from the U.S. coming here to experience this.
I definitely noticed that. One of the things in a few rides on the streetcar, certainly met foreign visitors, but it was really common to talk to people on the streetcar from Wisconsin or Virginia or Texas that found this to be their easiest path to a ticket for whatever reason, or had a curiosity about coming here. You made me think of this, Blair. Just one quick thing back to Algeria and Lawrence. I looked this up the other day, and maybe you guys knew this, but the entire state of Kansas has just over 3,000 Muslim population. Now, here's an African country coming primarily Muslim population that is made to feel like it could not have been more at home. And people talking about, if any Kansas City that ever wants to come to Algeria should stay at their house. And I just think that whatever this is at its best, I think it happened here. And certainly it's provincial and we're not aware of every story around the country, but I think that's going to be pointed to for generations.
What a fortunate pairing, though, to put a country like Algeria in a college town. Maybe that doesn't happen or happens to a lesser extent in Kansas City, but in a college town just seemed like the right mix.
I think you're right. And I think also anybody listening should Google Blair Kerkhoff in college town in Algeria, because you were alert enough to do a story on why that would be and how that played. It was more broad than just there, but you're right. Those were meant to go together.
All right, let's take a break. And when we come back, I want to talk about what's in the future for Kansas City when it comes to big sporting events. We're back on SportsBeat KC talking FIFA World Cup and Kansas City with star columnists Vahe Gregorian and Sam McDowell. I thought going into the World Cup that, in general, that Kansas City and the U.S. had a couple things going for it that it didn't have in previous World Cups. Certainly, we're more, don't you, Sam, don't you believe we're a little more soccer sophisticated than we were at any other time, really?
Yeah,
I mean,
absolutely.
We've gone through success with Sporting KC, the Kansas City Current being what they are, what they've become. So there's that. I also thought the fact that not only with the event in this country, but maybe more importantly, in our time zones, right? We weren't having to wait till midnight to watch a game or set the alarm for 5 a.m. to go watch a game. They were on, in when it was convenient for us, not the rest of the world. And I'm hearing complaints now from the rest of the world that I'm sorry, not the rest of the world, but from the U.S., that those semifinals are going to kick off at 2 p.m. Central. Spain, France on Tuesday. Tomorrow, we're recording this on Monday, and England, Argentina on Wednesday at 2 p.m. And people in the U.S. aren't happy about that, but I'm thinking that's not a bad thing.
Yeah, I mean, look, I mean, I think what really stood out, and it explains why they're doing this, is when you think about just how many people were watching, for example, Saturday's match at Arrowhead Stadium, and you think about how many people are, when we have sat in that press box, what is it, 7 times for an AFC championship now? And you feel like the whole world's watching the game that you're sitting at. The whole country is watching the game that you're sitting at. And the Super Bowl gets a couple 100 million people. They'd estimated that last time Argentina was in the quarterfinal, I'm eager to see the numbers for this one, that, 400, it was like 350 to 400 million people had watched just the quarterfinal match. And so this Argentina match that we just saw against Switzerland was the most watched sporting event that has ever been.
Originated in Kansas
City. In Kansas City. And so, of course, they should make sure the rest of the world can have a convenient time to watch this, as long as it works out with the American time zone as well, which it does. I mean, I would rather have a match be at 8 o'clock. It's more convenient for our schedules, but I think those numbers that I shared are a reminder that it's not about our schedules. It's about trying to get the whole world to be able to watch these matches.
That's right. And so the semifinals will be, because they're in the afternoon here, there'll be convenient hours in Europe and in South America. So the countries with the most investment in soccer will be able to see, won't be inconvenienced by the start.
Yeah, because when we were watching Switzerland, we had estimated it was like, Blair, I think you had done, it was like 4 a.m. or so. It was very some point during their match. I think it was maybe started at 2 and went to 4:30 in the morning.
Yep. So, all right, let's talk about the investment, the dollars that went into securing this. Was it states of Missouri and Kansas City collectively had to come up with about $90 to $100 million. And Kansas City got about an $80 million
in addition to the federal money.
Federal money, which was about $80 million, mostly for security and safety. One city in particular, Chicago, didn't bid because it didn't want to have to fork over that kind of money for a World Cup. What was it worth it for Kansas City?
Yeah, I mean, I think, look, Chicago has a different argument about this than Kansas City does. Chicago probably feels like it doesn't need to prove itself, and I think that is part of Kansas City's fabric, is feeling like it needs to have the conversation that we had earlier on this podcast, is show the rest of the world what Kansas City is, because it's always been that way. And so that's why I said earlier, like, I think it's going to be hard to measure this. And I know that they haven't crunched the numbers yet. Pam Kramer, last time we spoke to her was the day before the match, had said that, they don't have all the figures yet. They will. I know Cliff Illig has a company that's going to look at all this data as well, a nonprofit company. And so I'm eager to see that. But I also do think that some of this is the actual impact is going to, have a trickle effect for like years, if not decades to come. And so, like, how exactly do you measure that? Because I don't know that that's going to show up in the exact data. And I think, we're speaking ahead of the data coming out. I think we have to be cautious in that, for that reason, about how we view it, because this tournament is not just about making money in this month. Like, this is about putting Kansas City to a different level than what it's been in the past.
An investment.
Yeah, totally agree with all that. And the thing that will really be interesting, and maybe there'll be some ways to tangibly track it, will be what these relationships do catalyze. And I'm thinking about one day, we've referred to KC House before. It's been a place where local leaders and international either business people or diplomats have gathered. There was a day I was there.
The purpose of forming
these relationships, right? Yeah, and they've had panel discussions, and I was over there one day where the regional consul general of Argentina, the regional consul general of the Netherlands were there. They were both based here for a month. On the very same day, the Austrian ambassador to the U.S. was there. The former U.S. ambassador to Algeria was there, and they're talking about the dozens, if not hundreds, of businesses that have had some contact through here before. They're talking about sister cities. I don't know what that really does, but to Sam's point, I don't know how you're going to be able to track the arc of that for a long time. I think you can say there's a groundswell here that's good. And I think that's sort of all we know right now. But I do think one thing that it circles back to your very first question on this point, Blair. One thing that I think is virtually tangible is that Kansas City enhanced its stock to be a 2031 Women's World Cup host. The complication with that is the money question, right? It took all these, certainly tens of millions, if not hundreds of millions, when you count sponsorships and hidden costs that we don't know. What is the willpower going to be? What's going to be the notion of investment by governments that are, spent? That's going to be, a really interesting dilemma, I think, actually.
It will be, because, and that's where the data is going to, I think, maybe suggest a story that isn't the complete story. And so whether or not those future decisions are based on that data or it's based in the long term, and Blair, I think you're the best person most equipped to answer this, is like where this leads Kansas City to hosting future events, because, I mean, you've covered more, I think, events, national events that have put their eyes on Kansas City than any of us have when it comes to, NCAA tournaments that have been here. This Kansas City has still hosted a ton of Final Fours, and just where this puts Kansas City in those conversations.
I think it goes back to some of the reviews that we've been reading, this all of a sudden sort of some national people are discovering Kansas City. Well, Kansas City has always done sports well, right? We've done big sports events here. NCAA tournament events, baseball, All-Star, Major League Baseball All-Star games. Kansas City gears up for that. We've never had anything quite like the World Cup. And so this, it's been spectacular, and we're in the afterglow of it now, and it's a true glow, and people are really feeling good about it. I think it puts Kansas City in a great position to be considered after that layer of New York, LA, other major, Dallas, maybe Atlanta, for Kansas City to be part of the next level of conversation for cities, because the Women's World Cup, as we've mentioned, is coming to the U.S. It hasn't been officially awarded, but it's coming to the U.S. In 31, right? 27 is the next year. It's in Brazil, and then 31 it comes to the U.S. And there have been 14 U.S. cities identified as basically invited to bid, and Kansas City is one of those. But other cities on that list, I wrote them down, are Charlotte, Denver, Minneapolis, Nashville, Orlando, San Diego, D.C., cities that didn't get.
A lot of teams that didn't get a chance, or cities that didn't get a chance to prove themselves.
Right, that's right. And you guys have seen on social media, like I have, like there's some envy out there from larger cities that Kansas City got a men's World Cup.
I think that's what stands out about it. Kansas City's ability to host this is there was a lot of outside people waiting on Kansas City to fail. And that failure perhaps came in the 2 hours before the first match, and we did not see that failure happen again, which, by the way, there's almost like a reaction like to there's a Swifties-like reaction whenever someone speaks negatively about Kansas City on social media, to where it is just, you just get blasted for it. Even
we do that really well.
Yeah,
we circle the wagons really well.
There might even be a hint of truth to something somebody says, and it's like, man, I think it was the Denver broadcaster had trashed Arrowhead Stadium. It's like, well, the Chiefs are leaving Arrowhead Stadium. They've decided they're leaving Arrowhead Stadium. And it was just, all hell broke loose whenever that clip was posted on social media. That's, like you said, they circle the wagons.
I was here in Vahe, you were covering national college sports back in the late 1990s, and Kansas City had just lost the NCAA national office to Indianapolis. And there was real concern here that Kansas City was fading as a town that was attractive enough to land sports events outside of the usual, the KU game, single game that would come and play in December, that sort of thing. And it was the Kansas City Sports Commission then. Kevin Gray was the president, and he was very, very concerned that Kansas City was slipping in national perception as a sports host town. And that's about the time that Kay Barnes, became mayor of Kansas City and had a vision for a new arena downtown to save the Big 12, which part of that downtown reclamation was the Power and Light District, which turned into the watch party headquarters of, basically World Cup soccer, and really got the ball rolling. And then just some foresight with political leaders, and then Kathy Nelson, of course. It's amazing to see what's happened. It's taken a while. It's taken, since the turn of the century, basically, for Kansas City to get restored as a leading sports destination. But I think we're there. I do. I think the World Cup proves that we're there. And now, why not? Why wouldn't Kansas City be considered, a destination for the Women's World Cup, for the Rugby World Cups that are coming in 31 and 33, men's and women's? If the Men's World Cup comes back to the U.S., which I think it will, based on the success nationally, as early as 2038, why wouldn't Kansas City be like, oh, yeah, check that box right away, right?
Yeah, really well said, Blair. I mean, I think what stands out about the way Kansas City approached this tournament, from the bid process to the base camp attraction to 4 teams, 2 of which are playing the semifinals. Kansas City will have a representation in the World Cup final on Sunday. To even the month that it was here, is Kansas City treated this from a top level perspective to the actual people in the city like it was the biggest thing that the city's ever had, because it is the biggest thing that the city's ever had. And if you are one of those events that you just mentioned, Blair, to me, that's one of the things that's one of the boxes I'd be trying to check is the city going to care that we're in their town? And that's what Kansas City showed over this last month, is we really cared that the World Cup was here.
That's what we said when we lost the Big 12 tournament to Dallas and Oklahoma City in the early 2000s, that at least when it was in Dallas, nobody in Dallas cared.
Yeah.
Here, it was the biggest thing in town. It's all anybody talked about. And I think that argument proved persuasive to Big 12 officials. Now, Kansas City had a new arena, but Dallas and Oklahoma City still had new arenas or fresh arenas. But Kansas City cared more than those cities did about that event. And maybe we're in that era for international sports.
Wouldn't you want your people involved, from the players to the coaches to the staff to, even a higher level to federation presidents, just to feel the energy when they're going through the biggest competition, the highest level of competition they've ever gone through? And without a doubt, I mean, it's not just, the city itself. I mean, there were attendance stories at these other stadiums to where, Blair, you were writing attendance stories early on because it was a contrast to what was going on in the conversation nationally at some of these other venues. And we had Argentina here, we had Ecuador here, we had Colombia here, we had the Netherlands here, and even the Algeria Austria game. I mean, the energy in the stadium at Arrowhead was awesome. And I do think, it prompted me to sort of reflect. When the Chiefs announced they were leaving last December, we were all out there days later for the Christmas Day game, and it was a surreal feeling being out there. I felt that during this World Cup too, of feeling like, man, this venue's going away. It's funny how that venue is mostly used from September through, it used to just be December, and now occasionally frequently late January. But what a great summer venue that is, with the open air, great weather, sitting outside and watching that World Cup. I thought the actual environment inside the stadium, which, as much as focuses on the city itself, which there should be, it's what we've often focused on, but the environment in the stadium was just unbelievable here. And I for the other events, I'd want my players and coaches and staff feeling that whenever they pick a host city.
I love that environment, and it was just to to maybe tie together some of your points, that sort of juxtaposition of those images, those colors, those noises, those chants versus what we normally see there, and how it just took on a life of its own was great. I'm struck by the thought, the SEC term about it just means more. I think that's part of what Kansas City had going for it with this. It's a just purely symbolic thing, but you come into the airport in Kansas City, you're walking into the World Cup. You go into Philly, Atlanta, New York, Miami, you might catch on that there's a World Cup there, but I do think that was the front porch that said, this is how we're doing it. I think that was an effective way to go about it, and it turned out to be of substance.
Well, maybe one more year for Arrowhead. Maybe extended its life by 1 year with the Women's World Cup coming in 2031. Decision will have to be made. And if Kansas City gets, a site, will they play at Arrowhead or the new Chief Stadium?
And I guess that would be, indicative of, here's one other thing, though. The rugby would have to be at Arrowhead, as I understood the number, if they get the rugby. And I think that calendar's a little later in the year. So one way or another, it could be extended. But I do think if it is extended, then you start opening up the question about what's the viability and potential future use of Arrowhead anyway, right? What does it take to keep it alive? What could it be? I don't know if we fully understand that question yet. Maybe we do, and I'm just naive. Maybe it's just got to come down.
No, we don't.
Oh, yeah, it's not. It's still a big question. To me, it's even a bigger question mark now than it was back in December when the Chiefs announced. So,
yeah, it's a good point. Yeah, I mean, I think, like I said, the open air quality of Arrowhead in the summer really shined. I mean, the three of us were sitting there during the Columbia match, and all three of us noticed the same thing, which is there were fireworks in the background throughout the city on that July 3rd match, and it's the celebration of America. And here, these two countries, Ghana, there's an African drum beat that's going on in the stadium, and you've got Colombia,
the chants,
just frequently, and it's like you just had all of this. You felt it in a different way than I think you would if you were in Dallas or Atlanta or LA inside those stadiums anyway.
Well said. Great conversation with Sam McDowell and Vahe Gregorian. Here's what's on my radar in Kansas City sports this week. The Major League Baseball draft was held last weekend, and the Royals went with college players with their first two picks. They selected Louisville outfielder Zion Rose, a good contact hitter, at number 6 overall, and right-handed pitcher Taylor Reid from the University of Mississippi at number 30 with a competitive balance pick. Unlike the NFL and the NBA draft, with baseball, the selected players don't go straight to the team that drafted them, but into the minor leagues, and it's difficult to project who will boom and who will bust. Here's hoping that in a few years we'll see this draft as a positive for the Royals. The Kansas City Current signed Dabinya to a contract extension through the 2027 season with a mutual option for 2028. The Brazilian star has been outstanding for Kansas City, and I thought this was interesting. No player in the NWSL has more contributions, that's goals and assists, than Dabinya since 2017. Congratulations to Ted Owens, the former KU basketball coach, who, it was announced this week, will be part of the National Collegiate Basketball Hall of Fame class of 2026. The ceremony in Kansas City will take place in October. Ted Owens turns 97 on Thursday. Well, that'll do it for this week. Thanks to our SportsBeat KC staff, producers Gabriella Lacey and Suzanne Hogan, and to our editors, Hannah Wise, Jeff Rosen, and Scott Chasen. Let us know what you thought of the show by offering up a suggestion or leaving a rating and review. Thanks so much for listening. We'll be back next week with another SportsBeat KC, where we talk sports in Kansas City.